Hey everybody, welcome back to Pomerium Live. Today's a doubleheader day, and I'm hanging out with friend and old coworker Sean Roberts from Netlify today. Sean, how you doing?
Doing great, man. I'm super excited to be on the stream and to get to hang out again.
Yeah, it's always good hanging. I think the last time we hung in person was you were just at Render last week, but I think it was the 2023 Render the last time we hung out, but in person at least.
Yeah,
But yeah, yeah. I guess before we get started, you were saying Render was a lot of fun. Netlify had a booth over there, which I saw some pictures on socials, but I guess kind of describe kind of what was going on over there. It looked like a lot of fun. I just saw a lot of cowboy hats. So.
yeah. If you've never been to Render, um, it is definitely a unique experience when it comes to conferences. It's far more about um, the culture and the vibe and just bringing people together to have more um, organic relationships and like conversations and things like that. And so it's a really just a fun experience.
Mhm.
And I think now they're on year 4 or 5. So I think every year the booths kind of adapt to that vibe more and more. And ours, especially our team, put a lot of amazing effort into having a great experience. And there was it was nonstop. Like we had at least um, probably 1,000 people come by the booth throughout those 2 days, 3 days, and it was
Okay.
so fun. So busy though.
Yeah. No, that's cool. That's cool. Awesome. So yeah, speaking of Netlify, so you're over at Netlify, and um, so Netlify has been doing a lot of stuff in the agent space, specifically agent experience and why that matters. And I'm gonna drop some links to that as we discuss this. But I guess for those new to this, what is agent experience or AX?
So agent experience is the kind of holistic view of what an agent like Claude or Windsurf in our case and things like that experience when interacting with a digital service,
Okay.
or really anything. So when we think
Yeah.
about user experience, we analyze how the users are interacting and what their journey is and how successful they are and what their feedback loops are and things like that. And it's the same deal
Okay.
with agent experience. So it's like analyzing what things can they do, what can they not do, when things go wrong, what happens, all of
Okay.
those little nuanced details and stuff. That's what we think about when we think about agent experience.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, I dropped a link to Matt Billman's post about this
Yeah,
when it got introduced, and I'll share some other links. So I guess in terms of what you've been doing over at Netlify for AX, I guess what are some of the initiatives you've been doing? I'll go ahead and drop the AX site that you shared with
yeah,
me before.
yeah. So as far as the initiatives, also just to back up a little bit further, the whole AX naming and kind of calling attention to this problem and advocacy of trying to bring the industry together to work on it is based in our research and our work around trying to support agents like Bolt and Devin from Cognition Labs and things like that. Like
Okay.
before we knew this problem existed, we were just trying to support these teams to
Okay.
ship things. And then like the things that we started doing were like, this is not unique to us, right? Like this
Yeah.
is, we're having to come up with new conventions and solve specific problems and reduce friction for agents and things like that. And it has nothing to do with Netlify or the agents in particular. It's just this new persona that we need to start supporting. And so all I have to say is like all of our initiatives around supporting these agents. Right now we have more um, AI code gen tools using Netlify to host and deploy um, developer sites than
Okay.
anyone out there. And that's all a testament to our investment in trying to make that super easy for their agents to do.
Okay.
And so there's all of that work, and we're still continuing to do that. So there's those initiatives. There's this advocacy and supporting emerging standards that I'm working on. So there's the Agent Experience website, but also working with folks in academia and folks at like Microsoft and SourceGround
Okay.
to help come up with standards for these things. And then,
Okay.
yeah, just finding more ways as well to just like improve developers' lives uh, that are either building agents or using agents to build.
Okay. Gotcha. And that's super fascinating that you've been reaching out to academia as well, because like I took computer science at school, and my last year I took a HCI course, human computer interaction, and I imagine you're speaking to people in that space, I guess, or
It ranges. Like for example, working with the folks at Stanford, they're kind of like the design part of the school.
okay.
So yes, so in that sense, but also folks that are doing agentic research in general, and more specifically security side as well, is like trying to figure out what the right way to kind of support agents in general, and then um, the more nuanced kind of can of worms when it comes to security and all that stuff
Yeah.
is a big one in the academic space.
Yeah, for sure. Like where I'm at Pomerium, we're like digging into well, we're a security product, like basically a identity aware proxy, or application gateway for more intensive purposes. But yeah, we've been digging into the security space too, and it's like it's I don't know what your impression is, but like I think I think people are excited about building. Like I know like people like web devs and app devs, it's not that they don't care about security. I think they're just like, oh wow, I can build all these things. And like it's more, there's a lot of excitement around the space right now. And so it's like, I don't know. I feel like maybe some people think like it's not that they don't think about it, but it's kind of an afterthought because they just want to build right now.
Yeah,
I,
yeah,
I I don't know if that's kind of your impression or
I think so. I think that it's really hard right now to break down what's signal and what's noise from the industry, and
Mhm.
there's just this hype mob of like this stuff is all amazing and there's nothing that can go wrong with it, and like or rather not even that as much as it's just like look at all the good parts. Yeah, there's bad parts, but ignore that for now, but look how good this stuff is. And I think that
Yeah.
um, it's hard to, like I said, break down signal from noise. Like yes, absolutely, there's amazing stuff, um, but the noise where it's like influencing businesses that and people individually that, oh, if you're
Mhm.
not doing this you're going to get left behind, or
Okay,
a lot
yeah.
of fear-based stuff, and it's just like so they feel pressure to adopt and things like that, and like is it more important to be super secure or is it more important to keep your job, things like that. Like I
Yeah,
think they
yeah.
have these weird internal conversations with themselves and amongst each other to again filter out signal from noise, and I think that's really a core driving factor in what the laxity some people are having.
Yeah. No, totally. And it's also, the space is moving really fast. Well, I'm sure we'll touch on Netlify's model context protocol server at some point during the conversation, but like I was at the MCP Dev Summit, I think it was like 4 weeks ago now,
Right.
and it's like lots of great talks and just conversations, but it's wild to think that like MCP only got released as like a spec in last November, and there's just been like a huge explosion of servers and just the ecosystem in general. So it's like this is kind of to the what we're talking about before about just people excited. There's definitely hype too, but like I think the hype is real. It's just yeah, it's just figuring out all the, like how does it all fit together, like in terms of, like
Yeah,
you're saying, like the AX and stuff. Like I know you were chatting with Kent C. Dodds on a live stream a little while ago, and
yeah,
he gave a talk at the MCP Dev Summit, I think similar to what you were discussing. So it's like just lots going on.
yeah. I think, um, like I said, I think the signal to noise is really tough, even with that, because it's like the explosion of MCP servers. I don't even know how legitimate that was, especially in the early, the initial 2 or 3 months from it, because most of them were different kind of people generating MCPs from the same open API specs that everyone
Yeah.
else had. So you'd have, you know, 5,000 MCPs across, 5 registries is probably 1,000 MCPs per, and those are just generated on demand. It's not people being very
Yeah.
intentional about this and building these things. That said,
Yeah.
I think that influence was like very important to get buy-in. Like for me, like the MCP, like the best thing it has done is got people to agree on a few small things.
Hmm.
Small things can go really far, and that influence of show, regardless of the usefulness or not, the numbers and the ability to kind of um, uh, produce growth within that ecosystem by automating it. Like, I think that
Hmm.
weighed very heavy on the adoption conversation, and then that influence. It's just like a network, building, where it's like people won't
Hmm.
support it unless there's people building it. People won't build it unless people support it. So it's
Yeah.
so all that stuff really has gone very well for that spec, and you're seeing. I think nowadays you're actually seeing actual proper adoption of it, which is cool.
Yeah.
But the early days, it was definitely just like, it didn't feel like, at least to me, it felt more noise than it was signal when you got
Hmm.
anywhere past the headline of some post. You know what I mean? So, so I
Yeah.
was probably more of a skeptic, going into things.
Yeah. It's funny you say early days because it's still early days for MCP, but the early days of the early days.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
um, but it's but yeah, like there's still a lot of people, like, because it is brand fairly new. Like I
Yeah.
was at the AI World Fair a couple weeks ago, and we had a booth there, and there was a lot of people who weren't aware of it because it is that new, like, a lot of people were either interested in AI. Some people might be riffing on some projects and stuff, but like there was just a lot of new stuff. Like even over the past 6 months, the ecosystem, a lot has been going on. So it's people are kind of catching up. It's definitely interesting times. Like AI is it's kind of like the industrial revolution, but it's going so much faster than that kind of thing, so there are parallels, but it's just the speed at which things are changing is, I don't know, it's kind of mind-boggling.
Yeah. It definitely feels like being around for the invention of the internet and helping influence it. Um,
Yeah.
and the way my mindset is shifting, and the opportunity I see ahead for all of us, is that, like, when we talk about, in developer tools, for example, there's a very
Yeah.
challenging skill set to learn to be proficient in these tools,
Hmm.
and especially AI code gen tools have really democratized that and really allowed that skill set to be accessible to them.
Yeah.
And so when we think about now going forward, when we're like, or rather, it's probably more in going forward, when we think about the market, um, the addressable market for developer tools, it's no longer the 15, 20 million developers that exist, traditional developers. It's now of the kind of 2-3 billion people who will use these types of tools. How much are they adopting these things? Right? Like, it's
Yeah.
it the skill set and the opportunity and the access is no longer limited to those with the skills to do it without an agent. It is now
Yeah.
accessible to literally everyone who can use these tools, that has access to the internet, right?
Yeah, totally, totally. Yeah, that's definitely a differentiator because like obviously we're developers, we have a developer mindset probably but like it, literally anybody can leverage these things now. And this, I guess this to to the point at AX, this is what makes it kind of crucial, I guess, like this has to be usable, but like I feel like developers are very critical, but they also can be very forgiving for dev tooling.
Yeah,
Sometimes, it's like, okay, whatever. Yeah, I know what's going on. Just let it do its thing.
yeah,
But, a user, like a power user, is not going to care that it was built in TypeScript or Go or Python or that it's performant. They're just like, the thing's not working, or like, I don't understand how to use it. And it's, yeah, like just and I don't know, this kind of falls into what Netlify is really good at. I mean, like Netlify has always been focused on developer experience, and this seems to be like an extension of that.
yeah, 100%. It's the way to think about it is not, do you want to support agents? Like, that's the wrong question to ask. The question is, do you want to support your end users that use agents to
Yeah.
interact with you on their behalf? Um, and so at the end of the day, like, because Netlify serves developers and people building custom software, we want to support them.
Yeah.
And they are using agents to do work. Some are, some aren't. But regardless, we want to be able to be there to support them to do this successfully, and that's what matters most. Like, a parallel that I think about is, um, if you're a restaurant and you want to support your customers who want to patronize you, obviously there's customers that are going to come and interact with you directly and come to the restaurant.
Yeah.
Then there's also people who are using DoorDash and Uber Eats,
Hmm.
that to delegate a courier to kind of go and pick something up from you. And you
Yeah.
definitely can say no if you don't want to support that, for sure.
Yeah.
But the reality is that's going to limit your addressable market and the business that you have. And again, it's your choice to kind of decide that. But at the end of the day, it's not a question of, do you want to support DoorDash or do you want to support Uber Eats? It's, do you want
Yeah.
to support your patrons that are using or purchasing through them, um,
Hmm.
to get your food and be a customer. And that is foundational to everything we do, because we don't, we're not just paid to write code. We're paid
Hmm.
to help make the business successful through the things that we build. um, and focusing on agent experiences is helping the business be successful by supporting the end customers that drive the business, and that
Hmm.
decide to use agents to interact with you.
Yeah, no, totally, totally. And yeah, the DoorDash example makes so much sense. And this kind of touches on what you were saying like before about like, you know, there's there's that fear that you're missing out, but there is some truth to it. Like if we go back, like I don't know, maybe like early 2000s or whatever, it's like, oh, what do you mean you don't have a website?
Yeah,
There's a tipping point. I don't know when that is for agentic, but there's going to be a point like, oh, why don't you have this, like, or no, don't bother with them, they don't have XYZ, and I
yeah,
don't know when that'll be. Maybe it is now already, but
yeah, yeah. That's if I were to give a few sentence kind of pitch to a business and why they should care, it is that same one. It's like in the early web, if you didn't have a website, you became irrelevant. And then when
Yeah.
search engines came out, and that's how people discovered stuff, if you didn't support search engines and showing up there, if you didn't do that, you became irrelevant. And now with agents being this kind of new generation's entry point to all these services, if you don't show
Yeah.
up, the math is clear. Like we're not just making this up, right? Like,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
you just won't like, and it's not. That is both. There's several people, or there's different camps that'll be like, oh, I'm afraid of that, and I'm gonna. There's some fear there. I don't want to be irrelevant, like things like that. But then it's better to look at it on this other side. It's like we know how these things play out. We know the opportunity if you adopt it and lean into those things. That's where you can stay ahead and stay relevant and stay competitive. And it's. I mean, we know the math. We know that this is where things are going. And if you ignore it, that's the risk. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not whether or not you're afraid of it or whatever. It's whether or not you ignore the reality, and that's the biggest risk. But if you don't ignore it and you start to invest, you start to learn. To your point, I don't know exactly when the timeline for this to be the kind of if you don't do it, it doesn't work. But I that timeline is nowish to the next year or so, because again, we've seen it within developer tools and web building already, because we have built a really good agent experience, and it's really easy for agents to adopt what we've done, including the Netlify MCP. And Netlify gets used because it is there, it can be used, and people who don't have the skill set to understand infrastructure or set all these things up, or just don't want to, right? It doesn't matter if you know it, it could be Tim Berners-Lee, right? He knows it. He doesn't mean they want to do it. And so like how can you show up to support them where they are today, using the tools that they want to use today? And we've seen a lot of adoption on our platform, and it's 100% because of our ability to kind of support people where they are today and where they're going. So yeah, I'll leave it there. It's
cool.
Already happening.
Yeah. No, I dropped a link because you brought up MCPs. I dropped a link to the Netlify MCP server. Maybe we can talk a bit about what the Netlify MCP server is, and then we can maybe talk a little more broadly about MCP. But so full transparency, I used to work at Netlify, big fan. So I have some biases probably, but there's the Netlify CLI, there's you can do things through the UI. What does the Netlify MCP server I guess do? I haven't actually tried it yet, so it's something on my to-do list.
Sure. So so we have these, whether it's the UI, whether it's the CLI, whether it's the API, or now MCPs or agents that work with directly. Those are all just access points to use the same platform. And the ergonomics and capabilities for what you can do with each entry point is specific to that context, right? So there's certain things you can do in the UI that you can't do on the CLI because it doesn't make sense to do on the CLI, at least right now. Things like that. All that to say is we're still trying to figure out what the right things are to bring into the MCP environment versus CLI. That said, today you can do everything that you can do with the CLI through the MCP. Where things get a little bit more nuanced is that you can start asking, you can do more dynamic things with it. So like doing things like pulling down forms data. So Netlify, allows you,
Okay.
if you build an HTML form and then you just put Netlify attribute on there,
Hmm.
whenever a user submits that form, we take that data, we store it for you, and we make it accessible for you, and you can export it and do whatever. So, but we have
Yeah.
that feature, and obviously there's things that you can do on the UI that you'd want to do. CLI, I don't even know, to be honest, if it does anything to expose forms.
Okay.
What I do know is that we now can blend um, what you might have traditionally done with a CLI with what you might do with the UI. And what I mean by
Okay.
that is the UI from an MCP perspective is actually going to be delegated to the agent, right? So the agent is in charge of that's what the user's asking a question. So like, let's say, what is my
Okay.
how many people signed up on my website today, for example?
Okay.
It's going to be where they ask that question, and it's also going to be where the results ultimately get shared. So there is a UI component to this, but
Hmm.
we delegate that part of it to the agent itself. And so
Okay.
um, the blended experience there is that we can we can source the data from the same place, format it in
Yeah.
a way that makes sense to then hand off to the agents to then represent it in a different way.
Okay.
So there's everything you can do with the CLI, plus more things that we're able to start exposing because now they're more usable in a context
Hmm.
outside of the UI alone. Even the people
Okay.
using the API before for these things, they were using that to then pipe to some UI of some variety. Um,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
so now we can just kind of mix those things, and it's really interesting. But we're discovering more and more use cases that we can do that maybe traditionally we wouldn't have done via the
Okay.
CLI.
Okay. No, that's super cool. And so, like, I guess in the context of if I'm running the MCP server and say I'm in like VS Code, I'm in Copilot chat or something, or maybe I'm in Windsurf, I can wire up my MCP server and then I can literally I'm assuming I have to have initialized my repository with Netlify to leverage the MCP stuff or
First of all, can you hear me? Because
yeah.
okay, cool. Sorry, you started breaking up on my end, so I wasn't sure if it's me.
Oh, okay. Yeah. No, I was saying
Uh,
like yeah, do you need to, because normally like when you want to start doing stuff with the CLI, you'll initialize the repository with Netlify. Is there a similar flow with the MCP server or
yeah, so like I said, it's a new entry point for using the platform. So it really depends on what you're doing or have already
okay.
done. Um, so if it's an existing site, um, or well, first let me say this. If you're using Netlify in a kind of a Git-based workflow,
Yeah.
then yeah, you would want to like your local, like whatever thing you're using to edit code should have already
Yeah.
pulled it down. But you're not actually going to use Netlify to do the MCP to do a deploy for it in that context because you're using a Git-based workflow. So you would
Yeah.
do a change, ask it questions. You would use the MCP can provide context to the editor such that the things it is doing, such as generating serverless functions or whatever
Okay.
for you, it does that correctly. But ultimately, because you're using that type of workflow, you would then push your changes to your repo.
Hmm.
That said, people who aren't using a Git-based workflow, which you don't have to, you can just
Yeah.
say, create me a new site or deploy this to this site ID, things like that, and totally circumvent the need to have a Git-based workflow. So
Okay.
the answer is you can, but you don't
Okay.
have to. And because Netlify also has this ability to kind of gives you you upload these deploys, and they have per upload or per build environments for each of them. You
Yeah.
kind of get this implicit version control automatically. So we see
Okay.
a lot of people, especially the AI native developers who would be more kind of like doing vibe coding work. Um,
Okay.
they just like everything that they want to do, they do, and then push those changes. And if things go bad, they can push things to branches, but they can also um, uh, just roll back and control what version is public and things like that. So with the platform and getting these ephemeral environments and the easy ability to just say deploy this, people are actually creating these new types of workflows. That's really interesting to see.
Okay. Yeah, no, I was kind of thinking from not so much the developer perspective, and so like maybe not having the MCP in like say VS Code or something, but like I've hung out with some of the people from Block, like Angie
Yeah,
Jones, and just they have their MCP client Goose,
yeah,
and like I could see like a power user like somebody on the marketing team just saying like what's our metric, like I don't know, pull our rum metrics or something, or
yeah,
like how many views, and you've totally removed the developer out of there, or you don't even have to go to the Netlify UI. You can just query it through the MCP and in like a human readable way. And I I kind of see that's like the superpower of like kind of that MCP flow. Not sure, still some developer stuff in there, I'm sure, but
yeah,
I
yeah,
feel like it's kind of like a way to remove friction in terms of
yeah,
getting certain things. So
yeah. 100%. It brings access to the platform, to tools, and who's using those tools. Could
mhm.
be a developer, could be a non-developer, could be someone trying to learn how to code. It doesn't matter. They just now have access to this, and again, this is the kind of the beauty behind MCPs as a protocol. Um,
Yeah.
it's it just aligns everybody on what the integration should look like,
Mhm.
um, and that alignment alone is like really the unlock that we have. It's not,
Yeah.
you know, um, none of that stuff is even new or like a novel thing in the architecture. It's not MCP itself is not a
Yeah.
technical revolution in anything. It's an it's an organizational revolution that people agreed on.
Mhm.
Let's use JSON, and if you put a tool here, we'll use it.
Yeah.
If you put prompts here and resources here, cool, and that's it. That
Yeah.
little thin layer, and that's unlocked everyone. And then I caveat the fact that that thin layer of input, everything below that is not really delegated, so it can be
Mhm.
basically anything. Um,
Yeah.
and because this has been given to an LLM, the LLM
Yeah.
can make sense of it and sort
Mhm.
out the things. And so the nuance between our platform and another platform, and your tool and that tool, gets normalized in a way that via the LLM and
Yeah.
that in contract.
Yeah. It's I don't know. I'm already solutioning in my head here, but like I'm thinking about, because I haven't tried the MCP server yet for Netlify. I am going to, but like I like I'm super comfortable, adding a domain in for my site and stuff and setting DNS records.
Yeah,
But I feel like in terms of kind of democratizing what people can do, I feel like, and maybe you do this already, but like I could just picture somebody saying, here's my domain. I want it for this Netlify site. Set it up for me, kind of,
yeah,
and like I feel like that's like a game changer for a lot of people
yeah.
potentially.
That's not in the MCP right now, but that's on the like immediate roadmap, because
Oh, cool.
like what's the kind of base layer stuff needs to be there today, and then
Mhm.
like again, this was to your point, like the challenge that you're hinting at here is that DNS and these issues are really DNS and these issues are really nuanced, and there's
Yeah.
state that happens and it's asynchronous and things like that, and we typically fall to this pattern of we'll use a UI to
Hmm.
inform the user of these states and kind of help solve this nuance. But
Yeah.
even that, it's like it's very easy to be confusing. Like what's a DNS propagation time or TTLs? Like what does that even
Yeah.
mean? You know, for like if you don't know, you just even developers, most of them don't know this stuff,
Yeah.
and exposing that information to an LLM, or to an agent rather,
Hmm.
that agent has both access to the information and the actions it can perform. It
Yeah.
can be asked, "Hey, I set up this. I pointed my DNS at Netlify.
Hmm.
Why why is it not done yet? Or like why can't my
Yeah.
site load?" It can in natural language say, because we just did this 1 minute ago, it's going to take X amount of time for it
Yeah.
to be live. And it can, and then they say, why? They can ask why.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's like we like on our UI, sure we could have answered that question, but like because again it's so nuanced, there's whys everywhere,
Hmm.
and some people might care about this and that, and just exposing this to again an agent that is interactive with the user is a really cool blended approach to like solve this problem,
Yeah.
right? Hell, even a very simple question of like you'll get people that just like that are like I want to use Sean.com for my email.
Okay. Yeah.
Obviously, that website, just so you know, not available.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That domain, not available, and they don't understand that, and they're
Yeah.
like, "Why is this not available?" You know, and they're just like upset. And again, our UI could definitely say not available, but it's probably
Hmm.
not going to answer the question why, or
Yeah.
like in terms of like to appease everyone's understanding of this problem.
Yeah.
Uh, Saying unavailable is enough for most, but not for
Hmm.
everyone. And then telling them that someone else bought it is also not enough of
Yeah. Yeah.
an answer for everyone. So it's like it really. I'm excited about that opportunity for just general usability of products.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's definitely interesting times. I gave a talk at All Things Open AI earlier this year, and uh, it was on GitHub Copilot extensions, which is AX related. But I happened to catch a talk from Rachel Lee Neighbors, "The Death of the Browser,"
yeah,
and I was talking to Tejas Kumar about this briefly before. But you know, to your point about AX, like things are changing. Like maybe long term browsers literally will disappear and it just becomes like, like Kent says, you just have your own Jarvis, or maybe there's still like some semblance of a UI for it, but it's not what it is today, and it's just interesting to see where things go. And also
yeah,
the context of where you're doing something matters as well, like to kind of like talk about like one of my favorite features of Netlify is the "why did this fail"
yeah,
in your builds, like a lot of times like I'll probably know why it failed, but like sometimes when it's just like I have no idea, you know
yeah,
that's still an LLM interacting with my logs, but I'm not asking a chat or something. I mean, maybe you could expose that through the MCP server, but it's
Yeah.
more valuable for me right now. Like, oh, I just did a deploy. I look at the thing and it goes, and I have this thing like, oh, it tells me how it failed, and then I can take that and put it into maybe say like a chat GPT or something to say like, okay, I've got a pretty good error here. And I don't know, maybe I've never encountered this error. So like it's like a two-step thing, but I think the context matters of what I was doing. I was debugging as a developer. So that probably makes more sense than like I don't know if that makes sense what I'm saying, but
Yeah, no, it does. And in fact, it's funny you say that. We shout out to Suzanne on the Netlify team. She is doing a lot of amazing stuff on the AX side. She recently added a button that's like open in ChatGPT, because you can link to a query into ChatGPT,
okay.
such that you can. So from the why did it fail output, we will give you the answer, but you can also take that into ChatGPT directly now, and and
Okay.
there's also a copy button for bringing it into other agents if you need.
Okay.
So there's that definitely that self-service aspect of context delivery, which would be the copy and paste type
Yeah.
of stuff. But we're also like, okay, well, build output should also be streamable directly to the agents that you're using, such that
Okay. Yeah.
you know that, hey, your build finished and it failed for this reason. Do you want me to fix it for you? Things like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. No, that's super powerful too. Like I mean, even as a developer, it's like I do vibe code quite a bit now. I'm still, even though I vibe code, I'm very critical of what it gives me,
Yeah,
but it's it's definitely allowed me to move faster. But to your point about the do you want me to fix this error? It's just making me think of, it's more of a funny side note, but when like Copilot or Chat GPT or something just gets caught in that loop, like,
yeah,
oh yeah, I fixed it, and then it goes, here you go, and it's like, no, and then
yeah,
I don't know, it's just funny because like sometimes I'm just lazy because I just don't want to code right now, and I just keep getting it to try, but then I think after like 10 times, I'm like, okay, I should probably just look at this
yeah,
myself.
yeah. Whenever I start to see the agent introduce a bug by fixing another, and then reintroducing the other bug by fixing the new one, it's like,
Mhm.
okay, here we go. And
Yeah, yeah,
time
yeah,
to
exactly.
reset here. But like going back to the other thing you mentioned from Rachel and Kent, as far as like my view on that is like I definitely think the web is going to change and adapt, but like
Yeah.
I definitely don't hold the same opinion that, let's say, Kent does, for example, that the web or interactivity is going to be primarily driven by MCP. Like I don't see I don't see that being the replacement for the web, right?
Yeah, yeah.
To me, it feels very akin to like everyone's going to have mobile apps, and then like that's the death of the web. And I will, I do think that the medium of using agents and more agentic experiences and natural language and stuff is different, right, than the mobile
Yeah.
apps. Or like it's more of a step change than a web experience on your phone, on the browser, versus an app experience
Mhm.
on your phone.
Yeah.
That those aren't so different that you need to change. But like, and so all it says, my view of it is that, especially with MCP and a lot
Mhm.
of things that we're working on as an industry, what I see more is that we've kind of reinvented problems that we've already solved, and
Okay.
we're spending a lot of time solving those problems again. And what I'm more keen to see is how what we've done for the web can actually
Mhm.
be more adaptable for AI agents and more consumable. Even MCP itself, like again, I think that the convention is great,
Yeah.
but we don't need, like, the idea of having standalone servers to do these specific things doesn't, to me, make any sense. We don't need to have a server to give context to agents, right? We can have, or sorry, and by that I mean, um, right now, to expose this information, someone has
Yeah.
to stand up and host a server that is a serverless or long-running process, right? That type of server,
Hmm.
and it has to respond to post requests to it. And what I bring that up is, like, context and resources and things like that are generally static, and I would rather us have pointers to the correct resources on CDNs and things like that are more easy to do for most developers than supporting cacheable post requests to servers. Does that make sense? Like, right now, it's
Yeah.
hard to have these things be static and cacheable because of the MCP protocol.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I get your point about, like, if it's strictly content, like, because, like, when I worked at Dev 2 before Netlify, and, like, Dev 2 is like,
Yeah.
it's literally mainly content. And so, like, all we did was, like, you edit your page, it persists, and then it's cached forever until
Yeah.
you edit it again, right? So, like, you don't really need to regenerate that. I don't know if that's kind of what you're alluding to, because, like, it's a fixed asset at that point. It still needs to be searchable and stuff. But, like, obviously CDNs have good mechanisms for propagating it across the world and making it
Yeah.
cacheable. Um, you know, obviously, Netlify is a CDN, so there's a horse in the race there. But it's the same thing with, like, a lot of platforms. Like, there's a lot of CDNs out there, and it's something that definitely helps reduce bandwidth for sure. So
Yeah. So
yeah,
the thing, for me, it's actually, it's not even a Netlify specific thing, right? Like, because what I see is people having to pay for CPU and compute
yeah,
in order to deliver a static file, like for
okay, yeah,
large stuff. And it's just like that. That's not direction where we want to go, I don't think. And we can, like,
yeah.
we've already solved this problem, right? Like, it feels like, okay, every website needs to host their own server, and then
Mhm.
browsers are going to send post requests, and you just have to respond to that and say, okay, that that was originally how we did things, and it was expensive to do that. And we
Yeah.
realized, oh, not everything needs to be dynamic or served by a living kind of running server. It can be static,
Mhm.
pushed, and served that way. And so, like that's for me where, like, and this gets into the lower level details of all this stuff, but, like, when
Yeah.
I think about where the web needs to go, to support this, I think it can be better grounded in the practices and architectures that we've built up versus having this new pattern to do these things. Like, so that's my view. So, like, whether or not
Okay.
it pans out or not, we'll see. But, like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
um, uh, my hope is that we get back to those things, and
Okay.
can do better in that environment.
Cue the social post. Did this age well?
Yeah, exactly. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that where we're going right now, and again, it's early days, and we're, like, contributing to the spec to figure out ways to improve things. It's like, it's both
Yeah.
cumbersome to build, insecure, overly expensive. I'm
Yeah.
just like, but why? The APIs largely already exist. We already have, mechanisms to reduce the costs for hosting web systems. Um,
Mhm.
None of those things are applicable unless the agents and the protocol itself enforces it. And so it starts to be like, are we just, like, inventing a headless browser. You know what I mean? Like
Okay, yeah. That's an
are we,
interesting take. Yeah.
or are we like what new things have to exist here, right? Like, and
Yeah.
or are we just like started down this rabbit hole and like this is where we're going?
Yeah. I wonder, like, maybe the way you're kind of framing it is, you know, is that, well, I guess there's a few things here. Like, I get why MCPs exist, like the composability of being able to share things, like that definitely makes sense to me. Like, but I guess you're kind of, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're kind of framing it more like, you know, the MCPs kind of like a over glorified search engine to some degree, or no,
No,
or
I think it's I think that it's built on principles that make more sense for agents than it makes sense for web architecture. So it
okay.
looks definitely like how you would create communication protocols from one client to another client on the same computer, for example.
Hmm.
And then it was released, and all the web people were just like, "This isn't right. Like, this is
Yeah.
we should go a different way." And like again, I just see that over and over again. And so I I think that it showed us where we should go, but now that we know, maybe it's an opportunity to kind of step back and say, okay, what might be the right way to do this? Uh,
Hmm.
Leaning into again the practices and the technology and architectures that we've built over the last few decades for the web.
Hmm. Yeah. No, it makes sense. It's just, yeah, who knows what's gonna happen here, but yeah, like I get it, because like right now, like, well, one, every request you make with the MCP client, it's going to an actual server, and then like you do have to post to them. There's no like, I don't I don't think any of them, well, they have gets to show their tools and stuff, but I don't
No, it's all
think you
post.
can, even the tool call to check the tools are okay. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's all post because
So
it's sending JSON payloads to. It's not. It's tell us your server location
yeah.
um, and metadata about it, and we will do a post request with some information. It can respond back with corresponding response, but it's all post based and it's all um, hosted server architecture patterns. And that's
Oh
not to
yeah.
say that these aren't solvable. Like you can have cache responses on post requests,
Yeah,
but
for sure.
does it even matter? Like in terms of like if I could cache it, it only matters if the client understands caching, right? And then like again, it's just like it feels
Okay,
like
I see what you mean.
how
If you're not,
silly.
if it's not a web, if it's not a web-based client, then the caching maybe doesn't matter to some degree, you mean? Or
Well, it every every new problem that we have to solve not only has to be solved by the protocol, it has to be implemented by the clients.
Mhm.
So, for example, they just released a new version of MCP like yesterday or something or today. The
Yeah.
spec it's around authorization, and
Yeah, I saw that.
they add a resource verification step. So there's resource servers, which are the initial part of the OAuth flow, and then there's the
Mhm.
authorization server. And there are problems where something can pretend they're some a different server than they actually are, and the solution is just that when you make API calls the authorization server to the authorization server, um, you need to send also the resource that originally got the permissions to do that. And
Yeah,
this is
so it's not faked and
and all I have to say is it's literally adding one more field to that request, It says where the resource came from. And
Yeah.
that's a great, cool, awesome. It only matters until people start, the clients start sending it and start implementing that standard.
Yeah.
And so that's true for that. All right. So now every new problem that we solve, again, has that same problem. We have to decide on a solution, implement it in the spec, and then clients have to adopt it. And
Hmm.
clients, unlike browsers, which there's like less than 10 that are really, targeted,
Yeah.
unique browsers, right? Not versions, but unique. Um, it requires countless agents to implement these new changes. And that's where I'm like, okay, just the logistics of this um, uh, is really major. And
Yeah.
when I look back, like, okay, cool, we have um, been solving these problems for a long time, right? And there's always new problems to solve. It's not like the web is perfect by far, but
Yeah.
because we're adding a new layer on top of these things, we end up again back to square one, where it's like, cool, how do we solve the problem? Put it back in the spec, and then
Yeah.
now clients all have to implement it. And it's like, but like, again, are we reinventing like a headless browser? Like, is that the destination that we're actually
Yeah.
targeting this path? And if so, like, can we short circuit that by just leaning into already existing standards and figuring out how a web based approach? So,
Yeah.
but that's my take on how the web should change to adapt. It's not like I'm not.
Yeah.
I've spent this last several weeks building MCP servers, and like, so it's like fine, but like I do want better for where we're going to go directionally, and I think that that's what it's ultimately going to take.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. There's a question or a comment from, I don't know if you know them, but Kevin Swiber over on LinkedIn says, Sean, I do think maintaining protocol parity between language server protocols like STDIO, JSON-RP style, and remote MCP servers is a constraint many of us in distributed systems would not have chosen. I'm happy that Anthropic has been very responsive to the community, but fundamentally, this will always be a hurdle.
Yeah, I think um, I think the people working on MCP at Anthropic and the steering committee and just the community in general are doing amazing work. Right. This is
Yeah,
not a knock on any of that stuff, but I think um, we are there's several initial constraints that have been really hard and are going to continue to be hard. And I
hmm
also think that thus far, it's been because it's been so simple currently that we have a lot of um, freedom to make additive changes. So everything
yeah,
largely has been very additive and not backwards compatibility breaking,
hmm
and that's been great. But that there has to be a decision: is it backwards compatibility or nothing, right? Like, does it, or like
yeah,
kind of the web is, right? And browsers, attempt to be and things. Um,
yeah. Don't
and
break the web.
right. And I think that where we are today, and seeing things like was it the elicitations?
Oh yeah, that's new that's coming into the spec, or it's in the spec, but you have to. It's not implemented yet. I don't think anywhere.
Right. And I think that as we start to see more and more of these things, the stuff's going to get really tough because, again, like if you look at the elicitation spec, it's like basically the ability for an MCP server to ask questions through the agent to the user to get, what's your email address, which credit card number, things like that.
Yeah,
And right now it's just plain text, all this stuff, right? And it's
yeah,
basically, if you look at it, there are like a handful of elements that you can describe. I call them elements. Um, that you can describe in terms of like a select and a button or options, things like that. So you can give
Yeah.
them, and um, uh, the agent can decide how to represent that on the UI
Mhm.
and stuff, and that's cool. However, again, is this just like, should those have just been HTML elements, or like, did we
Yeah.
invent a new layer now that um, is constrained by these things, right? Like, uh,
Hmm.
and when these things need to change, like that's like these things start to become really complex as they start to evolve, and as we
Yeah.
get more and more um, and going back to what I was saying earlier, like it this feels more like, okay, if I were to build this from an agent's point of view, this makes a lot of sense. But if
Yeah.
I'm building from a web architecture approach, this feels like already solved problems. And
Hmm.
it like I basically for every part of the spec, you can pretty much hold up a web compatible version of that that didn't need any of this stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about like, oh, open API is all we needed, because that's a different conversation. Um,
Yeah.
but like, do you need a standalone server to understand a given API or what's available on a server and things like that? Probably not. Like,
Okay.
you send an options request to a server, and that is in the HTTP spec to return freeform options that someone could describe the, any part of the website and
Yeah.
more. And so it's like, again, like, I understand how we got here, but
Yeah.
my hope is that now that we know the power these things can unlock, that maybe we can take a different view of like, what if, what if we lean
Yeah.
into
Yeah.
existing things to achieve the same goals? Is that interesting for us to do as an industry? And um, by doing that, we unlock the specs that have existed for a long time and continue to evolve to support both um, the existing web and this kind of emerging web experience. And um,
Yeah.
I think we can accelerate these things much faster with less impact to digital services, and they don't have to learn this new spec. They just have to kind of adapt things that they already know and do, right? Like, that's what I'm interested in.
Okay. Yeah. Like, who knows? I mean, it's obviously early days. Maybe MCP morphs into something else, or maybe, like you said, the web evolves, or like maybe this is just like, it's not to say like, I don't know, I'm excited about MCP, but to your point, like, who knows? Maybe this is like a first phase of something. Like, who knows? It's it definitely makes sense what you're saying about like leverage what's out there already. That's like been, I know people complain about the web, like, because I know you know this, but like the web was originally made for documents, and then like we've basically shoehorned it to do some pretty cool things. Believe it. It's pretty wild what we can do with what was supposed to be just for documents. But so maybe there's a tipping point that causes, like, maybe it's not the death of the browser, then maybe it's like the evolution of the browser. I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. There's
Yeah.
even that whole take is wild to me. I don't think that's necessarily Rachel's take that the browser necessarily goes away, but I definitely see um, just like mobile apps didn't go away when we were like, actually we kind of over indexed on that, and like,
Hmm.
I think that there's going to be a good balance across all of these things, and
Yeah.
you meet your customer where they are, and um, some will be web based, some will
Yeah.
be agent based, some will be mobile app based. Some, like, um, that's always the game. And until the market really changes the adoption, For
Hmm.
example, we don't print DVDs
Yeah.
practically anymore because the market doesn't want that. And until the
Yeah.
market doesn't want the web will be just fine. And I don't see that happening anytime soon, regardless of this technology. And like having considered it pretty deeply as well.
Yeah. There's a comment over on YouTube. Speaking of documents, in 1996, with a 1.2 kilobyte dial-up connection, only thing you could load were documents. Yes, that's true. I remember when Gmail came out, which was revolutionary in terms of like
Yeah,
the spa and stuff. I I had broadband at this point at my apartment, but I would go to my parents' cottage sometimes, like to go snowboarding and stuff. And out in the country, like the internet's way better now, but at the time it was still dial up. And I remember just try to load up Gmail, and then it would try to load up spa mode, and then I think after about 1 minute, it has an HTML mode if that people might not be aware
yeah,
of, and it would go to that, and then it's like, "Oh, I can finally read it," and then, of course, somebody picked up the phone and it got disconnected, that's another thing, but,
yeah. Yeah, I
but
mean,
yeah.
it's still a problem to now. It's still a problem today. So to now, that's a new today now
Now.
today to now. So efficient. But it's still a problem today. Like we were, I don't recall where we were when I was thinking about this, but we were at an Airbnb, and it was
Okay.
like out in the middle of nowhere, and you have to communicate with someone through the Airbnb app
Okay, yeah,
to
yeah.
like get keys or something like that. And it's like that, like the performance team at Airbnbs, you know, got to be very conscious of this problem. Like it's not a old
Yeah.
problem. This is a very real problem. I mean, and it's also the world is not all in the U.S. with great connections and speeds and things like that as well, and high performance phones and stuff, even in the U.S. And so it's like acknowledging
Mhm.
that part of the reality as well. But like this brings me to another thing on this new AI side of things that has me a bit baffled is so I'm sure you've heard of it, like LLMs.txt, like the LLMs text stuff.
Yeah.
Um, that stuff's cool. I mean, the problem that it solves is legitimate, right? Like, um, in that, like, if a agent needs to source information from your sites, these things can help the agent source get oriented with your site in order to
Mhm.
figure out of your whole site where can you start pulling information relevant to a question. And um, that doesn't get solved with MCP. First of all, like,
Yeah.
there's a whole other problems that need to be solved besides MCP. And even that, actually, I can use that as another good example. And I think even Rachel makes this point in some of her talks.
Yeah.
That like we also already have sitemaps,
Mhm.
and that whole stack of things could be expanded to adapt this more appropriately, right?
Yeah.
Versus let's have this new thing, right? Um, Again, like this is hindsight, knowing that directionally this is probably right, but how should we actually look at the problem to solve it? I think that's what
Yeah.
we need to be doing even there. But as far as
Yeah.
the template side, the LLM's tech stuff is like there's kind of two variants. There's like this like small variant, and then I see people doing this LLM's full.txt
Okay,
and
yeah.
like FULL, not FOOL, but and what it ends up being is basically the entirety of the text content for a documentation site or a website inside of
Mhm.
a single text file. Ends up being massive,
Yeah.
right? And I know you know this, like the what I don't think people fully appreciate is that when people get really worried about random crazy costs when it comes to hosting providers on any provider, doesn't matter what it is.
Yeah.
By the way, Cloudflare does charge for bandwidth. So that's the side. But the what happens with all these providers is that someone will like they host like a gigabyte video or something on their website, and then a
Yeah.
bot runs it and just starts to try to download it a bunch, and then just rack up a huge bandwidth bill. Okay, going back to LLM's full. So what I'm seeing with this suggestion that people should like create a text file that has all the context of the website, and it ends up being a massive file.
Yeah.
That we're creating this problem for digital services to have a massive file and literally point bots at it. It's not will they find it. It's hey bots, here's everything you can find. And again, going back to are they implementing caching standards? Are they doing this? Are they doing that? The answer is probably no. They're probably just pulling the stuff, and that is going against best practices left, right, and center for what we've learned to do on the web for the past few decades. Right? Like, you don't do that unless you're very sure that you can manage it and make sure it doesn't cause massive issues from a cost perspective. And that's where it's like just one more example of like, we know where we want to go. What's the right? What should we do architecturally based off of battle-tested patterns and architectures already?
Yeah. And if that wasn't clear enough, folks, cache your LLM's text if you deploy one.
Yeah. And Freak AI, I guess, makes a good point here. I think this is kind of part of the beauty of the spec, related to MCP, for example. Am I still here? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. Sorry. I think this is part of the beauty of what makes MCP great is that there's a very thin contract, and because of that, and using LLMs to kind of normalize everything.
Yeah.
You can put whatever you want to in resources. You can put whatever you want to in prompts, and there's no standard for what to do there. And I think that that's great. That said, I've actively been trying to create a standards community group around context itself.
Okay.
So there's, if you go, GitHub, let me find it real quick. It's called Open Context Standards, OCS.
You can, if you want, there's a private chat. You can drop it in. I'll pop it up here. Oh yeah, cool.
So
yeah,
this is stuff that collaborating with, again, folks at like Microsoft and Windsurf and SourceGraph and things like that. And there's a pull request for how we can solve the kind of locally hosted context. For example, right now, if you want to provide context in terms of like cursor rules, would traditionally, you'd have a cursor rules directory or file.
Yeah.
Now, so there's cursor rules and Windsurf and Claude and this and that and this and that.
Yeah.
It's like,
GitHub
okay, well,
instructions. Yeah.
And so, there's a pull request there for a spec around locally hosted context.
Okay.
But anyway, the point that I was getting at with this is that I definitely think that is a missing part of this whole equation. Like, what is the standards for context itself?
Yeah.
And not just shoving whatever you want to into the text blob and sending it along, but like, are there optimal ways to do this? Right? Like, are there ways to reduce costs in processing time and all these things? And again, like these context is not used for humans to consume. It's used for LLMs to consume. So what are the optimal formats for that machine language? Is it English? Is it English in written text? It's like there's a lot of really interesting questions to ask there. And I think that goes to their point that like, what is the correct version of a resource or a prompt? and things like that, in terms of like what is the best way to host, deliver, format, um, cache, optimize. Like,
Okay.
what is that? We have no idea. We're just
Yeah.
shooting English at a machine and hoping to get good output.
Yeah. Who knows? Maybe it's assembly they need. Who knows?
I actually, the polar opposite of the LLM's full. There's this GitHub that I saw that was around. It's called LLMs
Okay.
min.txt, min, and
Yeah.
it's based off the like what we've been doing for minification and obfuscation of JavaScript files and things like that to optimize
Okay.
the format for delivery and consumption by the machine. And it's just this kind of wild English pointer type of format that takes
Okay.
what could be a lot of context into something smaller. And that's a great example of like, cool. Like that's a, that's what I'm talking about. We should get better at that and sort that, figure out what the optimal ways of doing these things are.
Yeah. No, for sure. It. I think that's a kind of a great place to kind of wrap things up here. It's like
Yeah.
it kind of summarizes kind of where we're at. It's still early days, and like there are existing standards. Maybe we need to improve some standards or add new standards, but it's like I don't know. It's super. I don't know. It's interesting times. That's for sure. It's like and to your point, like you said, you've been building all kinds of MCP servers over the past few weeks. So it's like it's not that you don't like them. It's just you just want to see them be the best they can be, kind of. And like there's a lot of stuff, like you said, that we've already learned that maybe we, kind of like Jack Johnson, reduce, recycle, reuse. I don't know.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
I had that album when my kids were younger. Sorry. but
Yeah.
but no, but it's like, yeah, and things are evolving fast, so it's definitely, if you haven't dug into MCPs, definitely take a peek at it. It's definitely something worth looking at. But to your point, Sean, yeah, I think it's still good to be vigilant about these things, because no, I mean, people talk about the costs to some degree, but there's other costs, like you kind of mentioned, potentially, if things aren't, architected correctly. So it's maybe it's the money that'll talk, that'll say like, we got to change this, because I can't live on craft dinner every night, kind of. Who knows?
Yeah, my encouragement would be for folks to dive into AX and the principles that are kind of defined there. And I think an important distinction to make here is that like MCPs are a solution to a problem. They are not
Mhm.
the problem itself, right? The
Okay.
problem is what we talked about before, that how do you support agents? How do you have a good agent experience? Because without doing so, right, you're
Yeah.
risking relevancy and access to your end customer and consumers in the long run. And um, solving contextual based alignment um, is what MCP is really solving. But that's one of
Mhm.
several principles that we need to really be considering in terms of what we should be doing to be ready and support this kind of new generation of architecture patterns and consumers.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Well said. Well said. Well, listen, Sean, it's always great hanging, and appreciate you taking the time out of your day. I know you have a lot on the go, so thanks so much for hanging. If you don't mind just staying on for 1 second, and for everybody else, thanks for tuning in today. And uh, I think the next one we'll be back with the Premium live stream. We're gonna be hanging with Abby, who over at DigitalOcean. We're still discussing what we're gonna be digging into, but check that out. That'll be on July 16th. And yeah, with that, enjoy the day, friends, and we'll see you in the next one. And